What's up, guys? Welcome back to Will of DDT. My name is Anonymous, and today we're going to be going over our Trafalgar Law deck profile. For those of you who've been watching our channel, you might have seen that we uploaded a guide for this leader already. This is going to be our updated version of the deck that makes use of a lot of the new Paramount War cards. So it's a very different deck list than before. It runs very differently. You have to get used to a slightly new playstyle. Essentially, whether you are a Law player from before who's looking to take the deck into set 2, or whether you're looking to get into Law for the very first time, this video is going to be your guide for playing Law in the OP2 metagame. All right, let's begin. Alright guys, so if you want to skip straight ahead to Decklist, feel free. There will be timestamps in the description down below. But before I get right into the cards, I figured I'd talk a little bit about this leader and where I think it stands in OP2. So just quick refresher for those of you who may not remember, Law's leader ability is if you have 5 characters on board, you can spend 2 Dawn to bounce one of them back to hand and play a character of a different color that costs 5 or less. So your whole point in this deck is to essentially fill up the board real quick by playing a bunch of little 1-cost units and then start spending 2 Dawn to replace them with 5-cost big units that can really swing the tide of the game, as well as recycle on play effects because you're bouncing things back to your hand. I really love this deck. It's a very technical deck, just very different from everything else in the game, and takes a lot of skill to pilot. And as someone who mained this deck in OP1 and really loved it, I honestly thought this deck was going to die in set 2. And that's because, you know, with things like Black being introduced into the game, with popular units like Vista, there's going to be a lot more board clear, so I thought it would be really hard to get your leader ability live. And in addition to that, I was just looking at the new red and green cards, and I just could not find anything that really benefited this deck without messing up the consistency of it. But lo and behold, I have never been more happy to be wrong. I greatly exaggerated, the amount of board clear that would be in this meta. Opponents have to spend a lot of resources, and we are playing our units very efficiently in this deck. So that's not something we're too worried about. And in addition to that, we have some great new cards in red that we can really leverage in this deck, as long as we're willing to approach the build a little bit differently. And last but not least, there's no Kaido in this meta. Kaido was the bane of this deck's existence, and it is damn near absent from One Piece right now. Very few players are playing purple, and of the ones who are, very few of them are playing Kaido. So there may actually never have been a better time to be a Law player than now. So I think this is a really good time to pick up the deck. I took this to locals recently, and I managed to win 2nd place. Unfortunately, I was really close to in that last match, but I just was not getting my power cards, and my opponent hit me with 3 Vistas. So the board clear is a bit of a problem if your opponent just draws the nuts, but I was still really happy with my performance, and I've since played it against some of my friends who are really good at this game. Played against Magellan, Kinemon, Whitebeard, Smoker, Zoro, and this deck performs fantastic against all of them. I don't think it has a truly bad matchup. So I really do love this deck. I think this is a great deck to invest your time in learning if you're looking to go to tournaments in OP2. And let's get straight into the cards. Alright guys, so as is standard, let's kick it off with the searchers. So first up, we have got 4 copies of Jewelry Bonnie. Nothing surprising here. This card searches all of the supernovas in your deck. That is really important because pretty much your entire top end in this deck is going to be a bunch of supernovas. So Bonnie in your starting hand is always great. Generally, that's what you want to see. And next up, we've got 4 copies of Nami. So Nami is going to search all of your Straw Hat cards. Once again, pretty standard stuff. This is the same as OP1. We just want to be able to search all of our Straw Hats and all of our Supernovas. And next up, here's a new card that we added in set 2. We have got 3 copies of Curly Dedan. So Curly Dedan, for those of you who don't know, is a 2-cost red, and on play she looks at the top 5 cards of your deck and add a red character with a cost of 1 to your hand. So she's just a generic searcher for all red 1 costs. This is a fantastic card. And yeah, she can even search your Nami. So, you know, you can play Dedan, search Nami, play Nami, search a Straw Hat, so on and so forth. So the synergy here is really, really great. One thing that I've tried to emphasize with this deck is that, you know, have some overlap between the searches, right? So Bonnie and Nami are obviously going to have some overlap. There are cards that are both Supernovas and Straw Hats, and then meanwhile, Nami and Dedan also have some overlap because Nami is going to search your Straw Hats, and some of your Straw Hats are red 1 cost, meaning Dedan can hit them as well. I try to keep my search targets pretty high. I see a lot of people putting out law deck lists where there's only like 10 to 12 search targets for each of these, which to me is that's just craziness, man. I mean, you are gonna whiff so much. I'm not sure if you guys are just super lucky and I have terrible luck or something, but if I have like 10, 12 search targets, I'm just like whiffing all the time. So in this deck, Bonnie has 21 search targets, Nami has 16, and Dedan has 17, and some of those overlap, of course. So yeah, I think that's, you know, I think that's a good ratio where you can consistently expect that you will hit successfully off of your searches. Also, just a real quick note, I'm sure some people will raise their eyebrows at this. Why only 3 Dedan? Because that's all I have room for. Law is just that deck, man. Pretty much every other deck in the game, you are only playing like 1 or 2 archetypes, if that. Over here, we technically have 3 archetypes. We've got our Supernova package, our Straw Hat package, and our red 1 cost package. So combining all of those in a way that's effective, where you're hitting your searches consistently and where the deck works together, it requires a lot of fine tuning, a lot of hard decisions about what to cut, what to keep. So yeah, if you see any weird 3 ofs in this video, just trust me, I wanted it to be a 4 of, but there just wasn't room to do that and keep it at a 50 card deck count. All right, guys, so that was our searchers. Next up, we have our blockers, Chump Blockers. So we've got 4 copies of Chopper. And again, man, like I just explained, don't shoot me. Only 3 copies of Beige. That's all I could manage. So Chopper is really good because it is a red 1 cost, searchable off Dedan, and it is also a Straw Hat, so it's searchable off of Nami. And Beige is just, Supernova, searchable off of Bonnie. So yeah, these 7 are going to be your Chump Blockers. And one piece of advice that I personally recommend for OP2 is use these guys liberally, man. I feel like in OP1, we were a lot more careful with our blockers, like, only use a blocker if your opponent's swinging for big numbers, like 7k or 9k or something. In OP2, just use them liberally, man. After you've hit your board of 5, if you have some of these blockers up, it doesn't matter if it's a 5k swing, just use the blocker. There are so many things in OP2 that can get rid of these little guys. You might as well use them while you can, generate some advantage off of them. So yeah, that's my advice. Don't be too stingy about when to block. Just block. Keeping your hand size big is much more important, so I'd always rather block with these little guys than counter and lose hand advantage. So yep, that is the blockers. Next up, we have 2 copies of Sunny-kun. Again, this is just good for consistency's sake. It is a Straw Hat card, meaning it's searchable off of Nami, and it's a red 1 cost, meaning it's searchable off of Dedan. So that's good, and it's just a vanilla 1 cost 3k, meaning that this guy can swing at your opponent's life if we want to play a little more aggressively. And I'll show you how in just a sec. So next up, we have got our 2k counters. So we have 3 copies of, once again, a new card from OP2. This is Makino. She is a 2k counter, and all of our cards in this deck, by the way, have useful on plays. None of them are just being held for counter's sake. Like, all of these cards can be useful in different situations. So yeah, Makino's on play is pretty great. You can play her, rest this character, and up to one of your red characters with a cost of 1 gains plus 3,000 power. So basically, you can play her, rest her, and now your Sunny-kun is a 6k unit that can swing at life. And even your Nami is going to be a 5k unit that can swing at life after Makino buffs them. So I really like that. It's a really cheeky play. You can just save 1 Dawn, and your opponent feels comfortable ditching their last counter from hand or something because they just see a Nami left. There's like, oh, there's no way that thing can swing, and then just Makino, rest, and suddenly Nami is swinging at your opponent's life, and there's nothing they can do about it. Absolutely love that play. So yeah, 3 Makino, and that is that. And then we are running 4 copies of Brook. Once again, it's a straw hat, so it's searchable, and he's a 2k counter, which is fantastic. And then on play, you give 2 Rested Dawn to one of your characters or your leader, meaning the 2 that you just spent on him, you can just attach it to whatever unit you want, which just always feels so efficient. So yeah, that's really nice. You can attach it to your leader, or you can even attach it to, again, your Sunny Kun, and suddenly your Sunny Kun is a 5k unit that can swing at life. So this deck is a lot more aggressive than the previous version of Law. Your little units will be used for swings a lot of the time. Your hand kind of determines how you have to play out the game, but a lot of times you are kind of playing this like a Zoro deck, and all of your little red guys are swinging at opponents' units and swinging at their life. And last but not least, for our 2k counters, we are running Otama. Again, just an amazing on-play effect, and she's a 2k. And, in Law, we can get the best of both worlds. We can play the card and then bounce it back to hand to keep the 2k. Otama, you minus 2k to something, you jet pistol it, you Vista it, sneak peek. Well, I'll show you that pretty soon as well. But phenomenal card. Doesn't need much explanation. I run 4 of her, and that's a total of 11 2k counters, and all of them are searchable, man. I really just love the consistency of this deck. You can just pull things to hand as and when you need them. So yeah, that's our 11 2k counters right there, and it is not uncommon. Like, I've played so many games with this deck, it is not uncommon to end up with like 3 2k counters in your hand, which is not something your opponent's counting on a lot of the time. So a lot of times they'll have to make that crucial decision. They'll try to swing for game, and they're just like, if he has it, he has it, and you have it. You always have the 2ks in hand, which feels really nice. So next up, we are going to go to our mid-tier units. So we have got 3 copies of Zoro. Surprise, surprise. He's a Supernova and a Straw Hat, meaning, again, he's searchable off of 2 of our searchers, and he's a 3-cost 5k. You play him, you swing for 5k. Nothing too complicated here. Just a good unit to have. Searchable and keeps up the aggression. Now next, we have yet another new unit from OP2. We are running 3 copies of Vista. So basically, this is just strictly a better Nico Robin. In OP1, we ran Nico Robin because she had that cool effect where you attach a Dawn, you swing, and you blow up a 3k unit. Vista does that on play. He does that on play. He is strictly just a better version of Nico Robin. The only disadvantage is that he is not searchable. He is he's pretty much the only card in our deck that is not searchable, unfortunately. That's kind of a downside, but this guy is just phenomenal. You play him, you kill a 3k unit, you use your leader ability to bounce him back to hand, or you play your blocker Law to bounce him and play him again, kill another 3k, and then he can combo with Otama. Like I just mentioned, you have Otama who can reduce a unit by 2k, so you can reduce a 5 cost to 3, a 5k to 3, and then play the Vista and just kill it. This kills Okikus, this kills, so many blockers in the game. It's just a phenomenal combo. And again, with our deck, we're just able to recycle it over and over and over again. So even if you only get 1 copy in the game, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. So that is that. We've got our Vista and our Zoro as our 3 reds. And as you can probably tell, if you haven't noticed, the deck is kind of deliberately lopsided now, right? Before, in OP1, we kind of made a point of having an even distribution. We had our low greens, our low reds, and then our high greens and our high reds. Now it's just pretty much our entire low end of this deck is just red, and then our entire high end in the deck is green. So we're going to be playing a bunch of little reds, and then we're going to be using our leader ability to bounce them out and play our 5-cost green power cards. Let's get to that lineup. Now, looking at those 5-cost greens, first up, we've got Blocker Law. This is just obvious. This is the key to this deck functioning. It just feels amazing when you fill up the board with 5 units, and then you just bounce a red unit, play this guy for 2 Dawn only, bounce something else, play something else from your hand, and just get the on-play effects. This guy is just key to recycling your on-play effects, recovering your 2k counters, and then he's a blocker. I mean, this card just has so much value to it. So again, just to remind you, the effect is on play, you can return one character to your hand and play one character with a cost of 3 or less from your hand. So keep in mind, this guy does not, unlike your leader who has to bounce a red and play a green, this guy does not have any color restrictions. You can bounce whatever you want and then play anything you want as long as it's 3 cost or less. One of the coolest combos in the deck that you guys are probably familiar with is, if you have, let's say, 4 units on board, you can just play Zoro as your 5th unit, swing 5k at life, use leader ability, bounce Zoro back to hand, play blocker Law. Law will bounce another thing back to hand, and then you'll play the Zoro again and swing 5k at life. It's a great way to keep up the aggression, and again, like I mentioned, you also have great on plays like Vista, so you can, bounce a Vista, you can play a Vista, bounce it back to hand, play Law, and then Law will, bounce something else back to hand, play the Vista again, and just kill more and more units. So this guy is key to recycling your effects. He is a fantastic, fantastic card. There's absolutely no reason you should be running less than 4 of him. I actually did only run 3 of him in my previous version of this deck. I have since learned a lot of things playing One Piece. So yeah, definitely we want to run 4 of our blocker Laws. And by the way, just one note for this guy, the same way that I talked about the 1-cost blockers and how you should use them liberally for blocking, with 5-cost Law, use him liberally for attacking. Even though he's a blocker, if you just keep him on board because you're just scared of your opponent, attacking next turn, you just want to have the blocker like in case, you're just going to lose out on so many potential swings. Don't just leave him there. As soon as he can start swinging, unless you're at a point in the game where you have like 0 life or 1 life and you like really need the blocker up. That's different. But if it's like mid game, the game still has a long ways to go, don't just keep him up out of just reluctance or just, trying to play it safe. Start swinging with 6k, and if your opponent swings at him, you have your chump blockers and things to take those hits. And if your opponent ends up getting rid of him, that's fine. You swung at their life, you force them to ditch some hand advantage. Don't be obsessed with this guy having to, serve his purpose as a blocker. Use him as an aggressive unit. That's one thing I've really learned playing this deck. So I'm just going to put our big lineup all together. So we've got 4 blocker Laws, and next up we have 2 copies of X-Drake. This card was not very good in the previous meta, I think, because there are very few relevant cards that were 4 cost. X-Drake's effect obviously is on play, KO an opponent's rested character that's 4 cost or less. Again, wasn't really relevant in OP1 outside of the Doflamingo matchup. Now there are a ton of 4 costs in this game. We have Marco, we have Atmos, we have the blockers in blue, Inazuma and Mr. 3. There's Yamato in green. There's so many 4 costs in this game. This card is just really relevant now more than ever. So being able to use your leader ability, swap out a red card, play this guy for 2, and just kill a 4 cost for free, just feels really, really good. I don't think you should run any more than 2 of him, because after that first part, he's just basically a vanilla. But you know what? I mean, that's still a fantastic effect. Getting rid of one of your opponent's problematic units just on play, especially when you're only playing him for 2 Dawn, feels really, really good. Next up, we have got 2 copies of Restand Law. This is a old but gold card. This guy basically on play, you can take one of your supernovas and set it as active. And then you can choose to swing with it again, or you can just keep it as active so that your opponent is not able to attack next turn. A lot of times I do find myself using it that way. Yeah, versatile card. Make sure to read the situation properly when you use him. But again, it feels really good, your opponent might think that you are giving up your blocker by swinging, so you might swing and they'll be like, okay, cool, he doesn't have a blocker next turn, so they'll just take that hit recklessly, and then you play this guy and you restand him and you still have the blocker. So yeah, fantastic card, earns a spot in the deck. One comment, I used to run in OP1, I used to run the unblockable Luffy and Restand Law combo. Obviously feels really good, but again, in this deck, unblockable Luffy just does not work out. The vast majority of our little units are red, so you don't have anything to bounce out to play the unblockable Luffy off of leader effect. I also just don't think it's the same threat that it used to be back in OP1. I mean, it's cool to close out games, right, when your opponent has like literally 0 life and you just want that one big swing that you don't have to think about. It's a cool play, but you know, ultimately I don't find most games that I need it, so I did take out unblockable Luffy from this deck, just heads up. Instead, I've put in a unit that I think I get a lot more mileage out of, and that is Basil Hawkins. We're running 2 copies of Basil Hawkins. You know, in most green decks, I don't think this guy is worth it anymore. Jet Pistol still kills him. You know, with black, we now have things like Sakazuki and, you know, cost reduction, all sorts of shenanigans that can get rid of this guy. But in law, you're playing this guy for 2 Dawn. You're just spending 2 to put down one of the craziest units in the game. So I think in this deck specifically, Basil is still worth it, because once he's on board, if they don't clear him that turn, he's going to do some damage the next turn. For those of you who don't recall the effect, it's if you have 1 Dawn, if this character battles your opponent's characters, that includes if your, you know, opponent chooses to block or whatever, he sets himself as active. So you can just put, you know, 4 Dawn on this guy, swing for 10,000, kill a unit, swing for 10,000 again. It feels really, really good. Basil is an amazing card in this deck, and I personally think he warrants a spot as 2 easily. So that is the full lineup of our big boys. And then last up, you know it has to be there. 3 copies of Jet Pistol. This is one of the best events in the game. We play, you know, Otama. Our Otama is now searchable, which feels really good. So if your opponent has some problematic 7k or 8k units, you can play the Otama and then reduce them to Jet Pistol range, and then just spend 4 for a Jet Pistol. Get rid of 8-cost Kid, get rid of Odin, get rid of so many, you know, troublesome things in this format. King Do, whatever it might be. And I've even had some crazy plays where I've like played double Otama and Jet Pistol, like the 9-cost Whitebeard. There's just a lot of big cards in this game that I think, you know, I used to run this at 2. I think it's really, really warranted at 3. I think this is a very, very useful card to have. So yeah, Jet Pistol, that is the final card we're running, where it's the only event we're running, and that is the deck, guys. Okay guys, so here is the deck list all laid out, so you can just get one final look at the all the cards and the ratios, and just some notes from my end for playing this deck. This is a versatile deck. You have a lot of different tools at your disposal here, and you have to be prepared to play it differently sometimes. You know, there will be those games where you unfortunately just don't see your Bonnie, you don't see any of your big green units, and you just get what I call the dreaded endless red loop. You have your Dedan, which searches your Nami searches some Straw Hats, and then you just keep top decking Straw Hats. You know, you end up with a bunch of little red units, and then you just got to start swinging with them. You know, you can play your Brook to buff something by 2, you can play your Makino to buff your Nami and Sunny Kun by 3, Vista and Zoro, those are swingable units. You just start swinging at life. You play it a little more aggressively, and then obviously, you know, your ideal game plan is to have the Bonnie, have your big green guys, and start bouncing them in until you can just build a really scary board with a bunch of these 5-cost green units and start going for game. Yeah, another thing, make sure to keep your Bonnie alive. When you get that blocker law, you know, bounce out one of your reds, bounce in the law, bounce the rested Bonnie back to hand, so now she can't be killed, and you have her safe for next turn, and, you know, bounce in something useful like a Vista or a Zoro. So yeah, you know, there's a lot of strategies, and you'll kind of uncover them as you play this deck. There are a lot of just sick combos you can pull off in this deck. It feels really adaptable. You can adapt to a lot of different scenarios, and again, in my experience, this deck does not have a single bad matchup. I've been doing really good at tournaments, I've been doing really good against my friends, and this is definitely the deck that I'm going to be taking to regionals pretty soon. So I hope you guys enjoyed this deck profile. I really hope you could learn some stuff about these different cards and the ways that they work with each other. Law is still going to be just that big brain leader. You're going to make some sick, really flashy plays with them. And I hope you guys enjoy the deck as much as I do. All right, guys, peace. We'll see you in the next one.